Imagine a night where every second counts, where a mother's life hangs by a fragile thread, and the cries of newborn triplets fill the air with urgency. In the midst of chaos, one man stepped forward, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, ready to risk everything to save lives. Before we dive into this breathtaking story, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you never miss an inspiring tale of courage and heroism. The emergency lights cut through the night, flashing across the dusty streets of the city, painting everything in red and white. Inside the overcrowded hospital, the cries of newborn triplets mingled with the harsh beeping of monitors, a chaotic symphony of life and desperation. The mother lay pale and trembling, her body racked with exhaustion and fear, the nurses working frantically to stabilize her. The hospital's supplies were stretched thin, and whispers of concern drifted through the corridors. Time was running out. Outside, Ibrahim Traoré moved with quiet urgency, his military uniform crisp, the red beret perched firmly on his head. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, yet there was a calm determination in his eyes. He had faced life-and-death situations before, but this was different. This was not a battlefield of guns and strategies, but one of blood, hope, and human fragility. Every second mattered, and every decision could tip the scales between life and death. As he approached the hospital entrance, he could feel the tension thick in the air. Nurses and doctors glanced up, hope and anxiety reflecting in their eyes. Traoré had a plan, but the resources were scarce. Blood supplies were nearly depleted, the lab strained beyond capacity, and the machines required to sustain the mother's life groaned under overuse. He understood the enormity of the challenge. One mistake, one delay, and the lives of the mother and her triplets could be lost forever. Even as fear and urgency pressed against him, Traoré's presence inspired confidence. Staff who had been teetering on the edge of despair suddenly found clarity in his calm authority. He coordinated swiftly, assessing who could assist, which equipment needed immediate attention, and how to secure the blood supply that would save her life. In his mind, he ran through every contingency, anticipating setbacks, imagining solutions, and preparing for the unexpected. Outside the hospital, whispers of his arrival began to spread. People in the surrounding neighborhood gathered in curiosity, drawn by the flashing lights and the reputation of the man in the red beret. Traoré had long been admired for courage, leadership, and unyielding dedication, but tonight, the world would see him in a different light. He would not be leading soldiers or commanding troops. He would be fighting against time itself to save lives in the most intimate, human way possible. As he entered the delivery room, the air thick with tension, he caught sight of the mother's frail hand reaching for something, any sign of help. In that instant, Traoré knew that every ounce of skill, every second of preparation, and every decision he had ever made had led to this moment. There would be no margin for error, no room for hesitation, and yet, in the midst of fear and urgency, there was an almost electric clarity. He could save her. He would save her. But even as he prepared to act, subtle challenges emerged. A nurse whispered that the blood type they needed was nearly out. The monitors flickered ominously, and the youngest of the triplets cried weakly, each sound a reminder of the stakes. Traoré's mind sharpened, not with panic, but with focus. He assessed, calculated, and made a decision. He would give his own blood if it was needed, risking nothing less than his own life to save this mother and her children. Outside, the city held its breath. Inside, every heart beat in anticipation. And in that moment, as the emergency lights painted the room with urgency and hope, the question lingered. Could one man's courage save 3 lives and inspire a continent? The night stretched on, heavy and tense, as Ibrahim Traoré moved swiftly through the hospital corridors. Every step was measured, purposeful, a balance between urgency and careful precision. Nurses scurried past him, their faces pale and weary, carrying charts, vials, and equipment. The monitors continued their relentless beeping, each sound a reminder of the fragile line between life and death. Traoré understood the stakes. Failure was not an option. The first obstacle emerged almost immediately. The hospital's blood supply was critically low. Type O negative, the universal life-saving match for the mother, was nearly depleted. Traoré's sharp eyes scanned the storage room, noting every vial, every donor bag, every potential resource. He spoke with the lab technician, a young woman whose hands trembled as she prepared samples, and discovered that no other nearby hospitals had reserves sufficient for the mother's urgent needs. Every moment wasted could cost her life. Time became a physical presence pressing against him. Traoré knew that waiting for permission from administrators would be fatal. Bureaucracy moved slower than blood loss. With quiet authority, he bypassed formalities, securing what little supply existed and issuing rapid instructions to the team. Prepare the transfusion, cross-check the vitals, and keep the monitors stable. His confidence radiated outward, giving courage to the weary staff and rallying them to action, yet complications continued to mount. One of the hospital's infusion pumps malfunctioned mid-transfusion, threatening to destabilize the delicate procedure. Traoré didn't panic. He quickly assessed the situation, improvising with a manual system while another nurse reset the equipment. Sparks of fear flickered in the room, but his calm decisiveness anchored the team. Even the youngest interns, unsure of themselves, followed his lead, inspired by his certainty and courage. Meanwhile, word of the crisis began spreading outside the hospital. Concerned neighbors, friends, and journalists arrived, their curiosity and worry creating a low hum of tension in the streets. Traoré, fully aware of the growing attention, remained focused on the mother and her triplets. He ignored the murmurs of praise and skepticism alike. The world could wait, lives could not. Amid the chaos, subtle acts of heroism unfolded around him. A local courier, hearing of the emergency, navigated flooded streets to deliver rare blood supplies from a nearby clinic. Volunteers helped stabilize the hospital, guiding anxious relatives and clearing hallways to ensure the medical team could work unhindered. Traoré observed these small yet vital contributions, realizing that heroism was not a solitary act, but a collective force strengthened by trust and courage. The mother's condition worsened. Her breathing grew shallow, the monitors alarmed incessantly, and the triplets' cries mixed with the sterile sounds of the hospital into a heart-wrenching chorus. Traoré's pulse quickened, but his mind remained precise, calculating every variable. The amount of blood needed, the timing, the sequence of transfusions. His military training and disciplined resolve now intersected with human compassion, forming a perfect balance between strategy and empathy. Even as he prepared for the final transfusion, mysterious challenges appeared. A power fluctuation threatened the monitors. A delivery van carrying essential medical supplies was delayed by a traffic jam, and a senior administrator questioned the legality of his immediate actions. Traoré navigated each obstacle with a combination of authority and negotiation, making split-second decisions that balanced urgency, ethics, and survival. Every setback heightened suspense. Every complication deepened the stakes, yet each one reinforced the truth. He would not fail. Outside the room, whispers of his heroism began to circulate. People spoke of a man in a red beret, stepping into danger without hesitation, risking his own life to save others. Yet Traoré remained focused, aware that accolades were meaningless if the mother and her children did not survive the night. He moved from station to station, checking vitals, reassuring the staff, and preparing himself mentally to act in the ultimate moment of necessity, to donate his own blood if it came to that. As dawn approached, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The transfusions were nearly complete, but uncertainty lingered. Would the mother stabilize? Would the triplets survive? Every heartbeat, every flicker of the monitors, carried immense weight. And as Traoré steadied himself for the final, critical stage, a quiet tension settled over the hospital. The moment of truth was almost here, and the outcome would define not just lives, but the courage and heroism of a man who refused to stand aside. The sun had barely risen when a new crisis emerged. Just as the final transfusion was about to begin, the power flickered violently, plunging part of the hospital into darkness. Monitors beeped erratically, alarms screamed, and panic threatened to ripple through the room. Traoré didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the room like a commander on a battlefield, calculating risks, anticipating every possible outcome. He barked rapid instructions, guiding nurses and interns to manually stabilize the mother's vitals, while technicians scrambled to restore electricity. Outside the hospital, tension built like a storm. Curious neighbors and worried relatives pressed against the gates, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding inside. Rumors began to spread. A hero had arrived to save the mother of triplets, and the city held its collective breath. Traoré, aware of the growing attention, stayed focused. He knew that heroism wasn't about recognition, it was about action. Every second he hesitated could cost 3 lives. Then another setback. The blood supply arrived partially delayed, with one critical bag damaged during transport. Traoré assessed the situation in seconds, weighing the risks of using the compromised supply versus waiting for another delivery that could take hours. His decision was immediate. He would donate his own blood if needed. The room hushed, and even the seasoned doctors recognized the gravity of the choice. Every movement, every instruction from Traoré carried precision and purpose. As the transfusion began, tension in the room became almost tangible. The mother's heartbeat remained fragile, while the tiny cries of the triplets reminded everyone of the stakes. A sudden complication in her vitals forced Traoré to act instinctively, coordinating emergency interventions while simultaneously reassuring the team. Sweat mixed with fatigue on his brow, but he refused to step back. Each challenge became a test not just of medical skill, but of courage and composure under immense pressure. Suspense escalated further when a minor staff error nearly interrupted the infusion. Traoré caught it in time, his sharp gaze noticing what others missed, preventing catastrophe. Around him, ordinary people, volunteers, interns, and nurses, rallied with renewed determination, inspired by his unwavering focus. Every act of cooperation, every gesture of loyalty, became a lifeline in the mounting tension. Even the hospital environment itself seemed to conspire against them. Flickering lights, clogged drains, and malfunctioning equipment created an atmosphere of uncertainty, almost like nature itself was testing their resolve. Yet Traoré remained unshaken. He adapted to every unexpected obstacle, improvising solutions with calm authority. His decisions were swift, precise, and imbued with a sense of moral clarity. He would not allow fear or circumstance to dictate the outcome. Outside, whispers of awe grew into a chorus. People spoke of the man in the red beret, moving through chaos with courage and focus, unafraid to risk his own life for strangers. Social media and word of mouth spread the story, amplifying the suspense and anticipation. The city seemed to vibrate with collective hope, united in prayer, tension, and admiration. As the transfusion neared its final stage, a subtle, almost imperceptible crisis emerged. The mother's vitals dipped dangerously, threatening to derail all progress. Traoré's eyes narrowed. Time slowed in that instant, every decision and action magnified. He coordinated a delicate balance of medical intervention, human support, and sheer presence, preparing to give his own blood if the situation demanded it. Every heartbeat, every second was a battle, every breath a testament to resilience. Finally, the critical moment arrived. The mother's vitals began to stabilize under Traoré's guidance, though the tension had not fully lifted. The triplets, tiny and vulnerable, let out faint cries of survival, signaling hope. The room remained charged with suspense, every staff member aware that while the immediate danger was abating, the night of trials had tested courage, skill, and human endurance in ways no one could have anticipated. And through it all, Traoré remained the calm center, a figure of resolve in a room filled with fear, hope, and the uncertainty of life itself. The rising action had pushed him to the limits of endurance, creativity, and bravery, and the climax was now within reach. The moment that would define not only his heroism, but the lives of 4 people and the inspiration of a continent. The tension in the hospital had reached its peak. Every monitor beeped like a drum of fate, every breath of the mother and her triplets hanging by a fragile thread. Outside, the first hints of dawn crept through the windows, casting golden streaks across the chaotic scene. Traoré stood at the center, his military uniform soaked with sweat, the red beret firm on his head, eyes locked on the fragile lives before him. This was the moment where courage, skill, and resolve would meet fate head-on. A sudden complication jolted the room. The mother's blood pressure plummeted, and the oxygen saturation dipped dangerously low. Nurses scrambled, alarms blaring, but it was Traoré who held the calm authority in the storm. He assessed every variable in seconds: the amount of blood remaining, the speed of the transfusion, the fragility of her body. Then he made a decisive choice. He would donate his own blood if the final units could not stabilize her. The atmosphere crackled with suspense. Every hand in the room moved with precision, guided by Traoré's unwavering focus. A young nurse, inspired by his bravery, prepared the transfusion line while he double-checked the connections. The mother's face was pale but alive, and the triplets, tiny and fragile, cried softly, as if aware that life was teetering on the edge. Each second felt stretched, every heartbeat amplified in the charged silence of the room. Then the final challenge arose. A critical infusion pump faltered, threatening to halt the life-saving process. Traoré acted instantly, manually regulating the flow, his hands steady despite fatigue. The team followed his lead, coordinating seamlessly, the hospital itself seeming to respond to his determination. Outside, a faint murmur of hope had begun to ripple through those waiting: neighbors, relatives, and volunteers who had heard of the crisis were now invested in its outcome. Minutes stretched like hours as the transfusion continued. The mother's vitals began a slow, trembling climb toward stability. Traoré stayed vigilant, watching, instructing, guiding, and ready to step in again if necessary. Every small improvement, the softening of tension in the monitors, the strengthening of her pulse, was a victory in itself, a testament to strategy, courage, and human endurance. Finally, the turning point came. The mother's breathing stabilized, the color returned to her cheeks, and the triplets' cries grew stronger, more insistent. Relief surged through the room, yet Traoré remained grounded, ensuring that the progress was real and sustainable. Around him, the staff allowed themselves small smiles, tears, and quiet laughter, their collective energy finally matching the weight of hope that had been suspended for hours. The room slowly shifted from chaos to calm. The life-threatening danger had passed. Traoré's decisive interventions, courage, and readiness to risk his own life had tipped the balance. He removed his gloves, straightened his uniform, and glanced at the mother and her triplets, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He had not only saved lives, but inspired everyone in the room to witness courage in action. Outside, word spread quickly. Neighbors, friends, and journalists began sharing the story. A man in a red beret, a captain, had faced impossible odds to save a mother and her newborns. The city buzzed with admiration, respect, and a growing sense of pride. Traoré had transformed a hospital emergency into a symbol of heroism, resilience, and hope that would be remembered for generations. In that quiet, triumphant moment, it was clear. This act of bravery was more than saving 4 lives. It was a demonstration of what one determined individual could accomplish against overwhelming odds, a testament to courage, foresight, and human compassion. The hospital, once tense and chaotic, now hummed with relief and quiet celebration. Nurses and doctors moved with lighter steps, the alarms that had once dominated the room now mere background noise. Ibrahim Traoré, still in his military uniform and red beret, watched from the corner, his posture calm but proud. The mother of the triplets rested peacefully, her breathing steady, her face softened with the first genuine smile in what had been a harrowing night. The newborns slept soundly in their bassinets, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm with hope itself. Word of Traoré's heroic act spread quickly, first through the hospital corridors, then across the streets of the city. People whispered about the captain who had faced impossible odds, who had risked his own life to give others a chance to live. Soon, messages of admiration, gratitude, and awe flowed from across Burkina Faso and beyond. Africans hailed him as a hero, a man whose courage transcended duty and became a symbol of humanity's highest ideals. In the following days, the mother and her triplets received care and attention that mirrored the magnitude of the event. Neighbors and local organizations brought gifts, prepared meals, and offered support. creating a tapestry of communal gratitude that spread like wildfire. Traoré, however, remained modest, insisting that the real heroes were the staff, the volunteers, and even the city itself, whose collective spirit had made the rescue possible. The story reached media outlets and social platforms, inspiring thousands. Headlines praised the captain's bravery, photographs captured the red beret amidst hospital lights, and messages from other nations celebrated the courage that had saved 4 lives. Traoré's act became more than a single emergency. It became a lesson, a rallying point, and a reminder of the power of selflessness. Communities began to share stories of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges, motivated by the example he had set. Even in quiet moments, Traoré reflected on what had transpired. He thought of the hours spent navigating crises, of every tense second where decisions could have cost lives, of the courage he had drawn from his training, his instincts, and his compassion. But above all, he thought of the mother and her children, alive and thriving because he had acted decisively. He understood that heroism was not measured by medals or accolades, but by the lives touched and the hope ignited. Across the city, the mother of the triplets embraced her children with tears of gratitude, her story becoming a beacon of inspiration. Families who had once felt helpless now spoke of courage, community, and the possibility that even the smallest action could create monumental change. Traoré's example rippled outward, reminding everyone that bravery was not confined to battlefields. It existed in hospitals, streets, and everyday acts of compassion. And as the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow across rooftops and streets, Ibrahim Traoré stood silently, red beret catching the last rays of light. He had saved lives, inspired a continent, and shown that courage, empathy, and action could transform despair into hope. His story, though centered on a single act, had become a legend, a cinematic testament to the extraordinary impact one person could have. The world watched, inspired and awed, as the question lingered in the air. Unspoken but palpable. Could one act of heroism remind a continent of its own courage? In that quiet, triumphant moment, the answer was unmistakable. Yes.